Happy Monday and welcome to Casting the Net, Reeling in Holistic Health, where we care about your mental health and well-being. I'm your host, Coach Rice, and I want to make sure that you tune in every Monday at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time, where I have my special guest on to talk about real issues that matter most. I want you to check us out on YouTube, Facebook Live, on Business Facebook page, also on the Be Awesome Network. Stay tuned. I think you're going to really like this next guest. Happy Monday and welcome to Casting the Net, where we care about your mental health and well-being. I am your host, Coach Rice, and with me today, I have Larry Onan. He is a retired consultant, who never retires actually, and an author. So we're gonna dive deep into who he is and the books that he write. And so, Larry, tell us where you're from and how did you embark upon being an consultant and then leading to an author?
Well, most people think they got a dream and they're going to go someplace. I had no clue I was going to be a consultant. I had no idea I was going to ever author anything. I grew up in Western Colorado. And when I was at the University of Colorado years ago, I had a real traumatic experience that said, I'm on the wrong track. I was heading for theater. I love theater. And for 5 or 6 years of my life, I was in every show and I was directing and I was doing all kinds of stuff. But I was in a class one day and I realized everybody in the class, all my peers, were acting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They'd learned to put on a persona, but they weren't themselves. And that really kind of bugged me as a junior. I thought, if this is life and we're always acting, why can't we be real? And I started doing a little bit of, investigation of who Larry was. And it was a spiritual revolution. Basically, it came to me because I realized that, my purpose was not to be an actor and be somebody else's character all the time, but I was fearfully and wonderfully made for a purpose. And I came to grips with that as a junior at the University of Colorado. And that changed my direction. But even then, I thought I would be coaching and encouraging students because I was working with students, helping them get life change going for themselves. It was a spiritual dimension that they really needed to come to grips with. And I started doing that for a couple of years, worked in the Ivy League culture back in the Northeast. And then I started realizing that I had gifts and abilities that were beyond just what I was enjoying doing. And I'm really one that's convinced that you need to figure out what your gifting is. And there's some really good tools to help a person do that. And then once you figure that out, major in your majors, don't major in your minors. I think many people are struggling in life because they may be trained or equipped to do something that's not in their actual strength. And if you work in your weakness, you can do it. Anybody can work in their weakness. But I'll guarantee you this, that when you do, you're going to be tired at the end of the hour or 2 or 3 or the day, because we're designed to do what we were created to be. And if we are not working within those strengths, it will be exhausting. If you're working your strengths, you're going to be blessed and you're going to have energy to keep right on going. So, even though I'm retired and I do, I've got grandkids and I've got other things going on in my life, I'm still using my strengths and I'm working in my sweet spot. And when I do that, even in my age, I'm still energized every single day because I'm doing what I was created to be. And I think many times people forget that they were actually created to be here for a purpose. So, my journey took me one direction, now took me in a totally other direction. I still like the theater. I go watch it, but I don't want to play in it. That's too much work.
It's, in your work, how important do you think authenticity is?
If we're not real, and I know how to play the roles, and you get on the stage and you play a role, but you can only do that to an extent, and you're almost lying to yourself all the time. I think authenticity is when you tell the truth day one. I've got a guy that works on cars, and I complimented him few years ago when I first met him. And I said, I really appreciate you always being honest with me. And he stopped what he was doing. And he said, Larry, I learned a long time ago that I can't lie because I can't remember my lies. He said, so my authenticity is I'll tell you today what's true. And if you come back to me 3 or 4 years later, it's still going to be true. And the minute we start playing a game and fooling each other, we're in trouble because we can't keep track of our own lives. We can't keep track of the facade that we live. And authenticity lets you live who you really are. So I'm big on helping a person come to grips with who they really are.
That's awesome. So what do you think the roadblocks are when it comes to people finding out who they are once you really expose them to it? What roadblocks do
I
you
think
find?
you go back to the problem that people sometimes, if they don't know why God created them in the first place, I've got a very strong faith orientation to this. I believe we were created for that purpose. And if we get away from that purpose and we don't know what that is, we flounder because we do not know where true north is for our own lives. And I think people try to gut it out and make it work. It's a lot of people want to feel good about something. Life is not feelings. Life gives you some joy in feelings. I mean, there's a nice time to have a good feeling, but life is not full of feelings. It's not that I don't feel any more married. I don't like my job because I don't feel like it's me. We've got to figure out who we really are and then operate by who we are, not just the feelings that we gain. I can feel badly by eating sauerkraut for breakfast, and that gives me one feeling. But we need to be saying, okay, feelings is not where it's at. We got to start looking and discovering the who we really are, and then you'll start to see the other pieces fall in place. There's a roadmap out there.
I love it.
I find sometimes people say, oh, I'm going to, I live in Southern California. So if I'm going to go to Dallas, Texas, I'm going to take Interstate 10 or Interstate 40 east. I'm not going to get on Interstate 5 and head to Seattle thinking I'm going to Dallas, Texas. And I think a lot of people get on the wrong freeway hoping that they're going to end up in Dallas. And the further I drive north toward Seattle, the further I get away from Dallas because I'm on the wrong road to begin with. So I think a lot of times let's just stop and pause and say, what map are you wanting to follow here? What has God already told you to do? And when that starts to happen,
definitely,
it unpacks.
Yeah, because when I was younger, I knew in my heart that I was supposed to be serving others in the area of, mental health. But I did not. I was, life will take you like, you're not going to be able to do that, and you can't. So my mapping, my GPS was off, and I went into. I have a really good talent to sew and make clothes.
And what you did is you realigned your map. You got your map back out and figured out what the next city was.
Exactly.
And I think too many people are living life like they're at a carnival with bumper cars, and the power has been turned on and they're just hitting other people, but they don't even know when it's going to be over until the manager of the bumper cars turns off the electricity, and then everything comes to a stop. But up until that time, you don't know if you're going north, south, east, or west. You're just hitting other people. And yes, there is sometimes fun in one of those experiences, but the consequences of that fun can also be a necklash.
Yes.
There's issues that come with that, and we need to realize that's a part of the deal. Martha, I years ago, I was assigned a very unusual task because I was a nobody in a meeting, but I'd had quite a bit of success in my area. Was a specialty in fundraising with Christian nonprofit organizations. And I'd seen a number of successes. And so I was invited to this meeting, and we had consultants come in, and they were telling us how we were going to raise significantly more dollars. But they said, you will never raise that resources unless you teach people to be lifestyle stewards. And nobody in the room really understood what lifestyle stewardship was. I always thought stewardship was about my father. He was a pastor, and those were the 3 sermons a year that he had to preach on money. And no preacher likes to talk about money. For some reason, they're a little bit afraid of that subject. But what had ended up happening is stewardship was boiled down to get the money in the door for the church. That's how many people interpret it. I discovered in a study with a group of other guys, I put them together and I said, we've got to figure this out. Because what had happened in the meeting is they were arguing about should they start something new, what was the implications. There was ups and downs to it, and somebody in the room, and I would have no idea who it was, they said, let's just sign this task off to Larry and see what he can do to come up with the definition of what lifestyle stewardship is. So I wrote down on a yellow pad that day, but the only thing I wrote down is what is lifestyle stewardship. And then I had a mentor that helped me a number of years earlier when I was afraid to try new things. And he said, Larry, you've always got the freedom to fail. If you don't step out, you don't know if you can do it. You've got the freedom to fail. Now, that sounds like I was looking for failure. No, when you have the freedom to fail, it means that you can go back and try it again. You can readjust the orientation. And I'd learned that the freedom to fail was helping me break barriers that I never thought was even possible, because I was believing that that could really happen. And if it didn't quite happen, I could go back and tweak it and fix it and try it again. So freedom to fail was actually a freedom to step out and do the unknown. And I wrote that down. And then about a month later, nobody called me, asked me how I was coming on my assignment. And I told a few of the guys that were working for me, we got to figure this out because this can make a big difference in our lives and the lives of people that we know. And we started a discovery to figure out what lifestyle stewardship was. And it has really nothing to do about money. It's about ownership. A steward is one who works for and manages the affairs of somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm a manager of somebody else's stuff, I'm just simply taking care of what he already owns. And he doesn't turn over, he doesn't give me all he's got. He says, manage my accounts, oversee my employers, do certain things that I want you to do, take care of my land, clean my house, whatever those issues would be. When I started realizing lifestyle stewardship was what I was made to be, God said, I put you here for a purpose, Larry. Take care of my stuff. I'm going to entrust you with it, but I'm not giving it to you. It's still mine. The scripture says that the God owns it all. Everything in heaven and earth is his, and we're simply stewards of what he already owns. That was a life changer for me. It changed the guys that were working with me, because we realized we didn't own a house, we didn't own a car, we didn't own clothes, we don't even own our kids. We're entrusted to manage our kids, to take care of the house that we live in, to take care of the car, to take care of the clothes. But I get the privilege of taking care of those things, but I am not responsible for the bottom line of all those things. I'm managing the affairs of somebody else. Well, you apply that in overall life. If you realize your time, your resources, your treasure are not yours to begin with, and you get the privilege of managing it on behalf of the owner, it makes a world of difference how you even want to go about doing life. It's a brain adjustment, because many times mental health and other issues are coming because we're thinking wrong. And if we're thinking wrong, we'll never get on track. If I really want to be in Dallas, I got to aim toward Dallas. But, I will not get there another direction. And what I discovered, and this has been probably 45, 50 years ago, when people start to realize that they are stewards and they are not owners, and they are simply facilitating and managing something that does not belong to them, it makes a big difference in their mindset. And, I think there's a spiritual component. A relationship with God is really key to that. You can't manage stuff that you don't even if you're not connected to the owner. So
I love your analogies.
So if God's the owner and I don't know him, then I'm not really working for him.
You're not going to be able to steward.
You can't steward properly. Something that you're. So there is a relationship, a Jesus Christ relationship, very critical to. Even in the book, I go into how I came to connect with that and how I realized how I could live that life. But to me, the mental health part of it was, okay, I wake up every morning saying, okay, God, what's on my plate for the day? What have you entrusted with me to do today? And I got my little list. After we talk today, I've got to check off my boxes. I'm at the age where I've got to write it all down, because if I don't write it down, I'll forget it. but still, I feel like I'm managing the affairs of somebody else. And so the joy of the Lord is my strength. I get up every morning empowered because I'm working for the owner of it all.
And you know what? I love it. That's a whole mindset shift. It's not my finances. He
No, it's
just want me
not.
to steward.
And if you manage it correctly, he increases what you've got.
Exactly.
People think that, well, I just need more money. Well, treat the money you've trusted with right now right, and probably you're going to be getting more resources. God does not waste his blessings and his resources on people that are lousy stewards.
That is so true.
And
And
so,
you have to steward your time.
yeah, steward your time. You steward it all.
Yes.
It, money is one thing you can give. And in the Old Testament book of Deuteronomy, it's the Jewish law. The first 5 books of the Old Testament are very sacred to the Jewish people: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Well, Deuteronomy has got a lot of instruction to the people. That's what it is basically your instruction manual of how to live the stewardship life. And God says to the children of Israel through Moses, he said, look I don't need your money, but I need you to learn to trust me in all things. Money is a very tangible way where we see how God works. And so money is a tool to teach us things. It's not something that we just need more of or less of. It's a tool to teach us how to be a good steward.
Exactly.
So God says, I don't need your money. I mean, I've got more of it. It's all mine anyway.
Right,
So
exactly.
what I'm doing is giving you this thing called capacity to exchange money or whatever it would be. But I'm doing that so that you learn to trust me in all things. You need to learn to trust me. So when I put my money to work, I'm watching God. I'm trusting God to see what comes out of that backside. Now, I don't always like the consequences. I'm working on my income taxes, and when I don't like it when I got to pay the federal government more money, but that's my management of my responsibility.
Right.
So it's not even my money to give to the federal government. It's his. And if that's where he wants to go, so be it. I can live with that.
But that's a whole it is a whole different mindset
It's
shift
a mind shift. It's a huge
when you
mind
do
shift.
carry yourself in that manner. Because belief is powerful.
Well, when you put your belief to it and you start to apply, people sometimes think the Bible's a holy book. No, the Bible's a book of instruction.
It
And it's a
is.
book of stories. And the stories instruct you as well as, like little quotes here and there throughout the scripture.
Right.
If you start to follow that as your manual of living, you're going to come out on top.
Yes.
If you try to ignore it and never get into it, it's like I need to work on my car, but I'm not going to read the owner's manual to find out where to put oil. Well, if you put oil in the wrong place in your car, you're going to have a disaster.
Yes.
Because not all caps are made for oil. There's other products that go into your car. So I think many times we are trying to wing it. And God said, no, you don't wing it.
You can't wing it.
You get my book out and follow the instructions, and
exactly.
You're come out okay.
So tell us about the book that you wrote.
Well, that came a couple of years ago. I've been writing, and I wrote another book in the 80s, but I was in Ireland about 4 years ago. And I do a lot of consulting in the European culture, Eastern and Western Europe. And I was in Ireland for a meeting, and one of the guys commented it was very difficult to find stuff in their particular language that taught biblical stewardship. And as I listened to him talk, I thought, Larry, you got to go back and dust off the cobwebs and all the notes, and you need to do something. And this guy was probably 35 to 40 years of age, and most of the group was in that younger generation. And I thought, I need to put this into writing again for the generation of Z's and the Alpha people, because they are clueless on a lot of the basic knowledge of being effective as a steward.
Right.
So I came back and put it together, and that's where intentional living and giving percolated out. And it's available today, but it's available any place you can buy a book. Intentional Living and Giving is on Amazon. It's Books A Million. It's your local bookstore. If they don't have it, they can order it for you. If you want to go online, you can find it even at my website. You can buy it there. But it's for the audience of people saying, I really want to maximize my life. And how do I go about doing that? So the book is in two parts. The first part is the very core principles of lifestyle stewardship. It's what you call more of the biblical manual of what is the core convictions and beliefs behind this idea. And the latter half of the book is now that you are, and I call them in the book, authorized wealth distributors. Because when you're authorized to give away God's wealth and resources, you're just giving away his stuff. You're distributing God's stuff. And the latter half of the book is what's the practical ways you live that life every day as a steward? How do you make money decisions? How do you make decisions on being deceived? Deceitfulness is huge in our culture today, where there's poor doctrine and there's bad stuff being said every place. How do you, as an individual, figure out when you're being deceived and who is a deceiver? Right. And how do you make judgments on where you give and where you choose not to give? And how do you make decisions on how to just get air? Because we've got to revive ourselves. So there is self-care and soul care that's got to go into all of this. So the latter half of the book is, now that you're an authorized wealth distributor, let me give you some very practical how-tos in doing all of these things. And they're how-tos to be manual oriented, and that if you follow these core principles, you can figure it out yourself. I don't need to tell you how to do these things if I give you the principles and how to follow it. And in the other key thing, I think, is the term of the book, the name of the book, intentional living. Intentionality is a choice. Every day I've got to be up and I say, I will intentionally work on my 5 things on my checklist. If I don't do it, it's not mean the day's disaster, but I'm not accomplishing what I wanted to accomplish without intentionality. So intentional living and intentional giving. How do I do that as an authorized wealth distributor? So that's the essence of the book. And but it's just really my life story. It's full of a lot of illustrations because life is full of stories. And I think we learn sometimes better by stories than we do by preaching. So it's interesting. I've had people reading the book and they don't tell me where they're at. They tell me what story they just read.
Oh, that is so cool.
It's kind of funny. And I think, okay, I know where you're at in the book.
Right. That is so cool. And so is it set up like a journal or both?
Well, every like chapter has action points. Now that you finish this thought, what are you going to do with it? There's some help that way. On my website at larryonan.com, there's no apostrophe on my website. The world of electronics does not like characters. So larryonan.com, I've also got a tool that could be really helpful to a lot of your listeners. I've got what's called a personal stewardship inventory. It's asking you 15 questions. You judge yourself on the answers. It totals out your bottom line from what you are. And then I gave you input based on where you are on your score as an authorized wealth distributor. And you can go online and take that yourself. You don't have to buy a book to do it. You have to give me I got to send it to you. So you got to have your email address and that kind of stuff. But I'll send it to you. Anybody out there, any place in the world can go and take the personal stewardship inventory. And when you do that on the website, I give you 3 chapters to read of the book free of charge. I'll download it to you so you can just read the first 3 chapters. So I'm trying to spread it around. I'm trying to give it away. It's intentional giving. I'm not going to last forever, but the book and the content will last a long time. So I'm glad for people to find tools. I think so many times we don't know where to go to find the right tool. And yet we need a screwdriver and we just can't find the right one to fit the need. And this book is like a bunch of screwdrivers. It's tools in your toolbox.
Oh, that is awesome. I love it. And so can you give the audience what's your favorite story in one of your books?
One of the stories, I think, this is a very short one, but years ago, there was a couple in Colorado that was really struggling financially. This was about 8 weeks before Christmas, back when I was a kid. And they were in a small town. They had an appliance store. They were struggling to death. And they told a businessman that had come through town that they didn't know if they were going to even be open the following year. And he said, well, if you are not giving to God and giving away what he gives to you, and he talked about 10%. This is, what people often call the tithe. That's not biblically the tithe. The tithe is 26%. So that's a different story altogether. But this couple, well, we're not even attending church, but the businessman said, well, you've got to be giving it someplace. So there's a local church down the street. Why don't you go down there and just give your tithe every week? And they did that for 8 weeks, and they were struggling. And they never told anybody what was going on. But at the end of it, they said, this is not working. It's a failure. They went and gave their last tithe, which was nickels and dimes, really, but they were trying to be faithful. Mm-hmm. And that night, it was a Christmas Eve service they went to, and they came back to their home, and there was a Christmas tree and gifts for all the kids. They have, to this day, have no idea where all of that stuff came from. They never declared they had the need. The next 3 days after Christmas, they sold more in 3 days than they had sold in the last 6 months. Now, that does not mean they were not triggering God. It was not a game. But God saw that they were being faithful, and then he started blessing them as return. And I think many times God does that. God wants us to learn from him. And if we are not putting ourselves in a place where we are putting trust into him to do something, he can't step in and do it. God's not going to waste his time, resources, and money on a bad steward. When you start to be faithful, he wants to be faithful, but he's not going to waste it. So that one story that comes out of the book, I remember that one. Somebody mentioned that to me about 6 or 8 weeks ago, that story just grabbed him, because they never ever figured out how anybody ever knew their need, because they were being very, very, very quiet about their need. Exceedingly abundantly above all that we could ask or think. That's what he can do. Now, that's what my God can do. It doesn't say he's going to automatically do it because you just push buttons.
No.
It means as you're starting to walk with him and are aligned with his plan, and you're moving in the right direction, he wants to step in, encourage you, and bless you, but he wants to be blessing somebody that's moving in the direction that's his design.
And it's part of the part of the relationship, because if you never been broke, how are you gonna know him as a provider?
I went through 10 years ago. My wife died of a glioblastoma brain tumor. Up till then, I was not very sensitive to people that were sick. But when my wife went through an illness that ended up taking her life, she transferred addresses to a much better environment than I've got. But because of that 18-month experience of watching her deteriorate and then die, I'm much more sensitive to other people that are going through health issues. I had to go through an experience before I was sensitive to the needs in that experience. And I think that happens over and over again. God says, I know this is a little painful, but I got a plan for you. And if you'll just hold on here, you're going to live through this to help other people. And if we're looking at it as an experience to help others, and I learn from God, then rather than, oh, he hurt me, taking the attitude of God is beating me up and God's a big meanie. God's got mercy and he's got grace. He's got a judgment too. That's going to still come at us, but God's merciful and graceful, and he wants you to survive and he wants you to thrive.
Yes, he does.
That's what I want. I want people to know that over and over again.
I guess I can ask you this question, one more question then. What advice would you give the listeners?
Make a decision, be intentional that I'm going to choose to live the way that God wants me to live. I'm going to stop living how I want to feel. I'm going to start making intelligent decisions based on God's direction. That means you got to figure out what God's direction is. If you're not familiar with the manual, you got to get into that. You need to get coaches and mentors that can help you. But if you decide to be intentional on connecting with God's plan for your life, you're going to find that plan. I think we often think, well, just the higher power will help me get through it, or the great man upstairs. No, let's don't treat him with such casuality. the God of the universe has you here for a purpose. He wants you to thrive. He doesn't want you to survive. But he also wants you to be aligned with his plan, and he cannot and he will not step in and make you successful in a way that is not honoring to him. So God sometimes stands back and says, I'm waiting for you to take the first move. So your audience, if you're out there saying, God, this is my intentional plan, I want to follow you, how do I do that? Put together the map for me. Now I can say, go buy my book. That would be, that's a little bit self-serving in that regard, but it is a manual. It is, in that sense, it's a guidebook. It will help you even decide how to pick the right pastor. You'll decide how to make the right decisions in life off of principles, not off of just games and fancy language, because we're operating by a plan that God laid out for man to live by. So it's a fun life. It's a joy. It's fun.
It is. I love your analogies and the way you really tell the story about, application when it comes to how we walk with Christ. I love it. And Larry, I just want to say thank you so much for, coming on my podcast. And I would definitely have your links to your books and your website and all the goodies that everyone needs to reach out to you, because this is what we need, especially in these times that we're living in right now. Guidance, more guidance than information. And so thank you so much for coming on. It's a joy to be with you this morning. Thank you very much. It's been fun. Yes, it has. And to the audience, if you know someone who is struggling with wanting to know their purpose, or wanting to know how to have a relationship with Christ, or be intentional about living and giving, please do share this video and comment, share, subscribe, because I always have amazing people on. So until then, you have a fantastic Monday. It's your time to shine. Your journey to chart. Coach Rice wisdom will heal every heart. So join us now. Let's make life suffice. Welcome to Mondays with Coach Rice.